Okay, Tim got a lot of things right, and he was very funny. He missed one thing, and that is he's not the last speaker. I am. So hopefully I'm right about that. I'm pretty sure I am. I'm going to conclude with what's new in Auros, and I think there's a lot of connection between what I'm going to talk about and what Tim just talked about. You'll actually see a little bit of slide overlap. That's because Tim is a board member of IKA. We're thinking along the same lines. We share a vision about the future of knowledge management, and that vision we expressed yesterday morning was kind of inherent in his presentation, and it'll also be inherent in the product software because it's guiding us as a curator of the Auros technology. The vision of the model-based future and knowledge as a service and assessing everything and making knowledge available through assessment everywhere it's needed is pervasive in this vision, right? And so that translates into features. A lot of the features you saw, especially, I mean, I can point to any of the presentations, but Chris from General Motors, talking about how the assessments, the process of peer review was being provisioned to the user, and then the actual criteria by which a stage gate is evaluated for readiness for approval was provisioned to the user, and they weren't going through static documents with no traceability, and the data is collected about what those users are doing and when they're using, ready for feedback, or ready for the feedback loop of learning. And Tim also had that in his presentation where he had that feedback from the knowledge consumer. Where is that delta, that red? And we need to understand that, learn from that, put it back into the process so that the provisioning of knowledge in the future makes it that much easier. It was also inherent in Josh's presentation, right, where he's talking about we made a change to the way we do the planning portion of our process, and it changed from one release to the next, and it will change, I imagine, every time because we're continually improving and learning because we have a representation of what we all believe to be our process, and we can continually improve that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about IQ 1 and 2, the changes we had. I'm happy that General Motors went to IQ 1 just this past weekend. Some of you will have seen some of the IQ 1, but IQ 1 is new from the last conference. We were still at 8.1 at the last conference, right? Yeah. So I'm going to go over some of those things, the AI, the UX change, and the AGILE-based changes. And so I'm going to go through that, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about futuring, about what to expect in Auros and what we're thinking about in the product. And obviously that isn't all about us. We want that to be a conversation with all of our customers. There's been massive contributions from customers in terms of translating the vision into features of software that are practically useful to the customers. So every one of you are a potential contributor, and I hope that you do, okay? So what's future for our product could be something that's in your mind right now, and that would be awesome. We would welcome that. Okay, so the big thing about IQ1 really is the name and the all-new look and feel, right? So I know a couple of you customers told me that that looks really different. We're a little worried. I think that we're kind of past that now. The new look and feel has certainly been successful. It's unequivocally been successful. It engages the new users in a way that's more intuitive, and it's made the look and feel more modern. There's a certain amount of fashion in software, so now the software complies with the fashion of today, and that also increases user engagement. And part of that was this idea of smart tiles, and I think there was a number of presentations in the last couple of days that have talked about this new user engagement model called smart tiles. So, in fact, I'm going to do these demos in a second. I'll just kind of talk about these things. High cohesion issue clusters, supplier portal, we're going to talk a little bit about configurable links, and then in IQ2, we continued the new look and feel. We have checkpoint reporting, which I think some of you are going to find extremely useful. The playbook video podcasts, connector app token-based authentication. I don't think we have too many of the IT folks here today, but that one will be very interesting. Assessment roll-up, saved assessment searches, and assessment optimized rule execution. So With that said, I'll kind of get into some of the demos so you can see that, and then we'll get into some of the featuring. So the new look, just in case some of you haven't seen it yet, this is the new skinning of the app, more modern look and feel. This is a knowledge packet. This is a knowledge packet of a method KPAC, and the skin of an assessment has changed. I really appreciate the new skin on an assessment. To me, it's a much more comfortable feeling work environment. And this is just a different kind of a method-based assessment control. So all much more consistent looking and definitely in the fashion of modern software. Then I mentioned the Smart Tiles landing page. This is a significant change introduced over a couple releases, but in IQ1 it became central, and in IQ2 it became even more central. So new users are diverted to the Smart Tiles page, and the Smart Tiles is just a more interesting, a more usable engagement model for infrequent users. I thought myself I would never use the Smart Tiles as very much because I thought it was best suited for infrequent users, and I find that that's all I use now. So I think a lot of you are now transitioning over to Smart Tiles fans. It's just an easier way to get into the system and move around. The next one I want to talk about is really central to our strategy going forward. I'm going to be talking a lot about the AI strategy, and so this high cohesion issue clusters was introduced in IQ1. And I'm going to do a little demo here. And this is how we are introducing AI to close the loop in knowledge capture. And almost everybody I've shown this to, demoed this to so far, has gotten very excited about it. And hopefully you'll see why if you haven't seen this demo yet. Who's seen the clusters demo? I know Steve has. Okay, a couple of you. Okay. So I'm going to go into a live demo, and I'm going to show you real data. I'm going to show you the high cohesion issues clusters as run on the issues database that we use to manage our own software. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over, I'm going to go into the issues area, and there's an issues report called high cohesion issue clusters. And what this is an example of an AI technique that I expect to underpin learning cycles, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but a way AI is going to help your organization become a continuous learning organization. So this is kind of the tip of the spear that was introduced in IQ1, the tip of the spear. And there's going to be more of this with more workflow around it to manage the closed-loop learning. But imagine this now. Imagine if your company had this capability. I'm going to go to the high cohesion clusters, and what it's doing is it's examining and analyzing every issue that's ever been raised in our company. It's then creating cohesive clusters, meaning issues or descriptions of problems or descriptions of work or descriptions of whatever they are, and creating a cluster where the cluster represents a high degree of cohesion or commonality in the cluster, right? So and it rank orders them, right? So if I'm looking at, in this case, the top cluster here, and I open it up, the cohesion score, I better move it over here, the cohesion score, this column is 99999, okay? Basically, that means the cohesion is so high, it's a duplicate. So, okay, great, we found a duplicate. No one had to find the duplicate. It found it by itself. Well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is if we're creating the same issue twice, we're wasting time. We could be creating a lot of confusion. One person could be working on one issue and documenting and closing it, and the other one's still open, in which case we got work to do, and someone might do the same thing twice. How many times have you had the same issue documented and two people working on it and they didn't know that they're working on the same issue? Okay? But I think it's really cool because it goes way better than finding duplicates. I'm going to close this, I'm going to close this cluster, and I'm going to go ahead and if I just search a little bit further down the list, here's a cluster with a cohesion score, my eyes are going bad, 9594. So it's a pretty high cohesion cluster. So again, the closer to 1, the tighter the packing of the issues in the cluster, right? The more meaningful the cohesion is, the number of this. So 9.5 is actually a fairly high number in terms of cohesion. We kind of say it's meaningful when it gets down to about 8.5, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this cluster, and I did not manufacture this data at all. This is our real data. This is a real issue. And if I open it up, oops, this is the centroid issue of the cluster. If I open up the cluster information, I'm not going to read it for you. I'm not sure if you want to go ahead and read it, but it identifies 3 separate issues that were created that are absolutely about the same thing with just subtle nuances of difference. So imagine if your organization, if it understood every time you wrote an issue and you had that issue before, and it told you it had that issues before. So if you have the ability to collect data, continuously analyze it, which is all about the knowledge-aware vision, you see how this kind of technology fits into it, right? Again, I did not manufacture this. It took me 1 second, click the first cluster, and I said, hey, that's a good one to demo. I'm going to show everybody that one. So the idea here is that the technology can find, in this case, common issues, but in the case of another customer, perhaps common CAPEX. You got a manufacturing engineer writing about flange links, and you got a product engineer writing about flange links. You want those things to be connected somehow if they're really talking about the same thing. Or if you've got failure modes you're trying to document, and you want to know all the possible duplications of those solutions without having to find them manually from a database of thousands, right? This technology can solve a tremendous amount of problems and produce a lot of good. So right now, it's just the identification of the cluster. I'm going to kind of get ahead of myself and talk about the future. This is part of our vision for what we call learning cycles, and I'm going to talk more about that later. But to do a learning cycle, you first have to have a learning opportunity, and hopefully it's self-evident here that the identification, the computer-aided AI process of identifying a cluster produces not learning, but a learning opportunity that if we can then put that into a learning cycle, we can learn from it. And if we institutionalize this, we can change our companies. We really can change fundamentally how the company's learning. I think it's going to be massive. I really do. Okay, so this is in IQ1. If you have the proximity search technology turned on, you can ask your support engineer if you need to know more about what that means. But once it's turned on, the clustering will be available to you if you're using our issues management system. And in IQ3, you also have that around knowledge packets as well. Okay. So that's one demo. Go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. Another big change in IQ1 was the addition of the partner portal. Provides minimum access to the knowledge base of your company to the supply chain. You want your supply chain to participate in your knowledge-based processes. You can have a portal interface that greatly simplifies the work for someone who all they need is the assessment that's been assigned to them. They get their assessment and they can do what they need to do. So if I just zoom in here, the partner portal looks like this. So here's the user that's assigned, and anything that's been made available to that particular partner, that employee and the partner will see the assessments that have been assigned to them, the issues that they've been granted access to as long as they're open, the knowledge packets they have explicitly been granted access, and sets they've been explicitly granted access for. So we have a number of customers that are deploying this presently, and I expect this to be a big part of the future of Auros. As once knowledge-aware becomes an important capability of your company, it seems obvious that you want to expand that to your supply chain. And then Partner Portal is how we intend to make knowledge-aware not an intra-enterprise activity, but an entire supply chain, value-added chain kind of activity, because the more we can engage the bigger, the broader, looser enterprise, the more intelligent we can be. The more we can learn, the better we can operate. Okay? The next couple are kind of small ones, but I think they're significant to talk about. So I think most of you, in fact, I talked to somebody, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, Daryl. He found this on his own. I didn't have to explain it. We were worried whether people were going to be able to find the quick links pinning. So the quick links at the top right, you can configure that in IQ1 and IQ. In the previous version, you could not. So now, just the activities you do most can be pinned and unpinned from your top right frequently used navigation items. Okay. In IQ2, we're really going for continuous improvement. We continued with the refresh of the user interface, the UX part of this. This is a screenshot of the My Stuff page, which got a significant uplift in IQ2. It's a little zoom-in shot of that. One of the big, I think, important enhancements in IQ2 is this idea of a checkpoint count report. So you can visualize checkpoints in consolidated Gantt charts through team boards, but if you just want to count across projects of how many checkpoints am I missing? How many checkpoints are, in different statuses? How many checkpoints do we still have to do? So with this report, you can look across projects, across all kinds of any assessment that uses a checkpoint, and start to count up the ones that are in different stages based on the scope of the report you write. So for those of you that are using method KPACs with checkpoints in them, this report will be extremely useful, and it's new in IQ2. Now, Josh and I are particularly proud of this one. So most of you know, and I don't think it's a secret, that Auros is kind of different. The knowledge-aware approach is kind of different. And understanding it fundamentally, there's a little learning curve involved. And we've been working and toying with different ways to try to bring people along the learning curve. We all know that when people see it, once they get it, man, people go off and they can do wonderful things. But the general approach is a little different. There's communities of practice. There's knowledge packets. There's assessments. True story for some of the Ford guys that are here now. When we first introduced the technology at Ford, someone told me there's no way we will ever use the term knowledge packet. Knowledge KPAC will never happen here. It's just a jargon you guys made up. Not the case. It didn't go down that way. People use the term. Because it's a useful term, because it's a useful concept. Anyway, the point is that the knowledge-aware concept is new. It introduces new terms. People have to get their minds around it, so we're trying to figure out ways to make this better. And I personally think, thanks to the efforts of the team, and especially Josh here, we've come up with something pretty good. So we're following a trend in industry to use video podcasts as a way to engage customers and engage and train in a way that is helpful and useful to the user in a self-serve kind of way. So what we've got, and I'm going to do a little bit of a demo here, is a series of video podcasts. They're conducted by Josh and myself, so if you don't like hearing us, don't go. But what you can do is you can go to the login in IQ1 or excuse me, it's just in IQ2, Josh, IQ2. And if you go to the support section, what comes up is the normal support information in the software, but I'm going to call your attention to this middle button here. So any of your users will be able to come and find this button, and when they click on the video podcast blog, they will be redirected to a site, and they have to register. But once they register, they're going to get a tool that allow them to, let me log in. And I got to give Brittany a lot of credit too. She had does a ton of work in pulling these video podcasts off, and as well as she's the one who organized and got configured how the tracking system works. So right now we have a single introductory video podcast and then a Basics 101 series with 6 video podcasts in it. Come on up, please. Okay, so here they are, and it's going to track the user through the video podcast. So I've completed this coursework. I'm enrolled in a second one called the 101. This is where there's 6. You can see I'm part of the way through it. And if I click on that series, You can see what the constituent video podcasts are, and you can track yourself. So it's a self-service. You can view these things when you want, and you can see which ones you still need to watch. And we believe that the content here is actually really strong. And if you want to become really understand the Auros software and how to make it work well, these video podcasts are a really good way. It represents the best of what we know on how to use Auros. And we're going to continue to do these. The basic course is still covers very basics, but we've got many courses planned. How to create communities, how to set up assessment processes, how to engage users, and we're going to be discussing these in video podcasts. And we hope that it helps you guys. I forgot someone over here. I don't know. Maybe the gentleman's not here anymore. He asked, "Well, how do we get off that plateau for the first year or two and accelerate and get using Auros faster?" This is one way. This is one way to accelerate that process. Okay, I'm very, very excited about this video podcast. It may not seem that cool, but it really is. It's some good content here. Okay. This one, I'm not sure we have any people who represent the role where this would be interesting to, but Auros, the vision for Auros has always been to make other applications smarter. Most of you, not all of you, but most of you, the predominant use case is to use Auros directly. But, you know, Daryl, who's over there, has given presentations in the past at our conference showing how knowledge can be conveyed directly into a CAD context. So our vision has always been that Auros will serve knowledge into the model-based future so that everybody in the company knows they put knowledge in one spot in a common way, and it can make every model in the company smarter. That's our vision, because I believe that is the future. Engineering processes are becoming model-based. We need to provision into the model. So to make that process easier for the IT folks, to make that connection, we need a process to authenticate clients, and so there's a new set of technologies in our software to make the client apps authenticate easier so we know who the user is. So, okay, it's just, if you're interested in that new feature, you know, come and talk to us. But it allows creating custom connections to Auros and allow us to know who that user is while they're connecting through that app. This is a Ship Constructor client app that Steve talked about yesterday in the advanced section. Okay, so just briefly, Matt talked about Borg's assessment approval stuff a little bit. They've pushed us a lot on how to do assessment approval, and I'm glad they have. It's been a complicated road. We finally think we see the end in sight for how best to do assessment approvals in all the complexity and the way that they need to happen. And we'll finish that vision in IQ3, but it started in 1, it's in 2, and in IQ2 we got to the second to last step where we can have multiple approval types on an assessment, roll them up, and understand whether the overall assessment has been approved. We've taken it in chunks, and so this was a pretty big step, and we're very happy about the way it's going. So if you rely on assessment approvals, it's been moving, and I think in IQ3 we will be at a very good spot for assessment approvals. Those of you who like assessment searches, we didn't have the ability to save those searches. Now you can add them to my stuff, and then you one-click and you got your assessment searches. Little less obvious and not very demoable, but actually a really good thing, and Jay Shree right here did a lot of work on this, so thank you, Jay Shree. But improve the way the assessment rule processing optimization happens. So there's a difference in strategy in how the order and the processing of which we do, we process the rules that are in an assessment so that we can optimize and get better answers quicker. Allowed us to do some more flexible things with design rules or with business rules and things like that. Okay, so futuring, my favorite topic. Okay, we got 5 minutes left. I think we can do this. In concert with Tim's presentation, there's going to be some commonality here. I want to introduce something that the knowledge-aware concept calls a flow model for knowledge. Okay? Craig talked about, hey, you really need to understand the difference between a requirement and knowledge requirements. They're different. So this flow model kinds of talks about that. So let's take a look here. We've got a digital enterprise. Anybody disagree that our enterprise is now unequivocally digital and will likely be more digital tomorrow than it is today, right? Nobody's going to disagree. So you got model environments like CAD, CA, PLM, ERP, MES, process planning. They're all model-based. You can go in there and hard code your rules to your heart's content, but it's going to cost you a lot of money in managing it, and you're going to have a lot of configuration problems because your design guide is going to be out of sync with your checklist for design review. It's going to be out of sync with what people actually know. It's going to be out of sync with the knowledge you've embedded in that system. Wouldn't it be better to provision knowledge and author it in a single spot and provision it? You saw those cool K-packs from the 3 contestants. They were all models. Now connecting to other models and getting the richness that the knowledge the model conveys is easy. So this flow model kind of talks about how this works. So we got flow down. Any systems engineer in here understand V models and all stuff? So flow down, we have top level requirements. I love the way Craig defines it. It's the performance of that system, generally attributable to some end customer need, right? It's not repeatable stuff. It's the performance characteristics that are required. You know, a rocket needs to be able to lift a payload of so many tons with, you know, so much efficiency. That's the top level requirement. How you get there is all kinds of knowledge, right? Then I want to introduce to you this concept of flow up. So all the things Craig was talking about learning is flow up, right? We're learning continuously. Craig had it, you know, from the backside of the organization learning, and he had this reverse triangle going back this way. That's the flow up, right? And so we're learning, and we need to organize that knowledge in a way that we can best meet the requirements that are flowing down. If we're going to break a car from 0 to 60 in 90 feet, okay, that's the requirement for a standard performance car, whatever it is. Actually, I don't know. Maybe their braking friends could tell us. But, you know, there's a lot of knowledge in doing it. It's mind-boggling how much knowledge there is in doing that. And so that's what we need to cultivate and make available to the rest of the organization so we can do that most efficiently. And that way, if the requirement changes, we can react to it better and understand our own capability. And we got flow in. So the flow in is more first principle, government regulation, and we still have this model-based enterprise. And back to the map metaphor, the navigation metaphor, what we really want to do is to ready all those things in a format that we can provision them to the model-based world. So I always laugh. If you go to a requirement system, they're asking you to flow down, say, okay, we're going to break the car, which means we have to dissipate so much energy, which means we have to have brake pads of so much size. Marcus, if I get this wrong, you know, don't be too upset with me. I'm not a braking guy. But you get the idea. And, oh, they changed the weight of the vehicle, and you got to go and redo all that. That doesn't work, right? Really, it does for a little while, but as you go into engineering, you do that, and you get all the way down to detailed design, you get all the way down to manufacturing, how big is the casting, all the way down to a fixture. You change something up there, you can't go back and start doing these up once again. You have to be able to provision based on the attributes of the context, which is what navigation's doing. Based on where you are, it's going to provision the tiles, the turns, or whatever. That's the model we got to have, and the flow-down model isn't the right model for that. It just isn't. You need to do some things differently. The life cycle's different, how you do it. The need for provisioning is absolutely there for learning. It's not there for requirements, at least in the traditional flow-down of requirements. So requirements tools just don't seem to do the job, and I think that's why, in Craig's case, he told them to go use doors or whatever it was, and they came back and said, no, it doesn't work. Because it's not the right tool for it, even though we think requirements are all the same thing. It's not. It's so clear. There's been so many examples. They're just not the same thing. Steve, I think you had a definition that was pretty cool, too, that differentiated between the kinds of requirements. You did that a long time ago. But now it's time to understand what are the impacts of those differences. Okay, so what we really want is to ready that knowledge for reuse in a way that we can just, without having to be aware, hard-coding the knowledge in the model-based world, we want that knowledge to flow through and be able to connect. So we need to abstract the processes. We need the models to know how to consume the knowledge, whatever it is, whenever it gets created, because it's ready for reuse. Google Maps doesn't have to be told about every map tile. There's a protocol that a map tile will be provisioned, it knows where to go, And if you zoom in, it knows how to provision the next level of granular, right? You don't have to customize each map tile to make it work. That's what we need to do to knowledge. So the process models become aware of knowledge, and that's where the idea of the name knowledge aware comes from. The process, the engineering, the models become aware of the knowledge, and you're not customizing and hard coding them or flowing down. We provision. That's the big deal. That's the vision. Whether you use Auros or not, I believe that's the way it's got to be in the future. Okay, so, and then Tim had in his model this idea of AI-assisted flow back. So there's a lot of things I can talk about the future of Auros technology. There's some I'd like, mobile, all this stuff we can talk about. But the most important one to talk about is how do we create a learning organization, a continuously learning organization as a capability, not as a tool set, but as a capability, right? You have a capability of designing brakes. You have a capability of designing turbochargers or timing chains. You have a capability of designing cars. You have a capability to learn as an organization. It's not a tool set, it's a capability. That's what we want to get. To do that, we need to be able to take what Tim did it so well, this is why I love his delta model, is those red deltas represent learning opportunities. So what we want to do with Auros is identify through AI learning opportunities, and we just showed you we can do it, right? Anytime something turns red and turns red at a rate that's higher than expected, we should start to identify those things through digital techniques, put them into a process for flowback, where they then become knowledge ready for flow up, that then provision back into the process, and we collect the data again about delta, Tim's delta, and again, we can continually having this process. It can't work on a human-based process. It can, but you'd be spending way too much brain power, and we can't afford it. But we can with computing power. But if you're not provisioning knowledge and detecting the delta, you can't. So this is why I think it's obvious that the assessment provisioning process is inevitable, because the organizations that are going to win are the ones that can learn continuously digitally. And you got to be able to do it, right? And so we call that the AI-assisted flowback. So when we showed you the clustering of issues, right? Hopefully you take that as evidence that we can take the data about how things happen, about how knowledge is getting applied. In Tim's model, the deltas, the assessments where KPACs are always red, the criteria of the assessment where they have more reds than you would think, right? We can identify the reds or the issues that are more common because we're able to cluster, and we can call that a learning opportunity, right? The cluster I showed you with 3 that were basically the same enhancement, there's something to be learned that we authored 3 enhancements that are that issue that are in essence the same. We didn't have to go through how many issues have we created, we're probably on 50,000 now or something like that. Issues, we didn't have to someone remember that there's 3 that are common. The system looked through all 50,000, told us that these 3 are the common ones. It'd be ridiculous to do that with a human. So once you have a learning opportunity, we can again through AI, and this is the part that I think is really cool, we can identify the people that should be notified. So this actually works really well. So if you, for example, you have an issue cluster, the issues all have participants. The issue cluster has a topic that's inherent in the words in the issue. We then can find the knowledge packets that have been created that have also approximate measured cohesion, and we find the authors of those KPACs. We can digitally, without looking at organizational hierarchies, identify with high accuracy the people who should be notified of this learning opportunity. We can then engage them. Okay, that's the stakeholder identification, so that's also an AI process. We can then formalize a process by which we invite those identified people to view the learning opportunity, the cluster of issues, the significant number of reds, the deltas that Tim talked about, and ask them to create the knowledge that's ready for reuse. Basically, we're saying we're going to, in oral speak, we're going to ask them to create knowledge packets, 1 or more knowledge packets. Or say, no, this learning opportunity wasn't real, or it was it was aberrant for some reason. We don't know how it's going to turn out. 50% of 90% of them turn into retained know-how. I don't know. We'll see. And once we have retained know-how, we can then ready that for use, create value tables, get the metadata so that they get provisioned accurately to whatever system assessment required in the design review. You're in a certain design review event, and it has a certain topic that needs to be reviewed, and it's this kind of change level. This item shows up there. Nobody does this through flow down, point and click. Oh, nope. It has to be provisioned dynamically. And if we do that, the knowledge will show up, and it's going to participate. We'll know its status, when it got evaluated, if it got ignored, which is data, which we then can derive new learning opportunities over and over. This is our proposal for a true closed-loop learning, right? But you have to be able to create data about how knowledge is getting reused to do that. And the only way to do that I know of, really, I'm happy to say, is Auros. The traditional requirement systems or the hacked-together systems that are PLM customizations, they're not going to do it either. Okay, so a big part of futuring for Auros is learning cycles, AI-assisted learning cycles. We are going to do everything we can to leverage the footprint of knowledge reuse to produce insights so that we can continue to learn, close the loop, and not make recurring mistakes ever. So one of the polling questions, do you continue to make recurring mistakes? Our aim is to make everybody say never. We never make a recurring mistake because we have learning cycles. Okay. I am done. Do you have any questions about Auros IQ1, IQ2, or Auros futuring? Ron.
Very excited about the playbook.
Thank
concept.
you. We are too. Thank you, Josh and Brittany.
Will there be an opportunity to add customer-specific content in that same delivery mechanism?
Ron, that's a great idea. I think we should. It never occurred to us, Josh. I don't know if we ever thought of that. We haven't, but we certainly think that would be a good. I just off the cuff think that's a good idea. I'm sorry? We welcome all suggestions, but that just happens to be one I think is a good one right off the top. Yeah. Sanjay's got a question. Well, no. I don't think Ron wants to share his best practice. I guess it'd be up to the customer, right? Whether they want to put it into a general pool. We do have a forum, an Auros forum, where you can ask questions and our AEs will answer. That's also on that same link. So that's another way. And then if customers post to the forum, other people will see it.
Yeah, hi Jeff.
Carlo.
When you showed the clustering thing, as I'm entering inside a form an issue, could you think of having that clustering happen as I'm typing?
It does.
It does?
It doesn't as you're typing, but when you save it, it then does the clustering around that specific issue and will give you a report. A little tab will show up at the bottom of the issue and show you all the ones that are around its cluster, in its cluster. So that is a little different. It's creating a custom cluster for the issue you're interested in.
Yeah.
What the clustering tool does is it clusters everything. It finds the relevant clusters without you having to say which one to start with, right? And it tells you these are the clusters that have high cohesion. It uses the same technology, but we do that as well.
Because my thought is, as I entered, and then it could be like a check to see if somebody else entered something similar before you submit type of thing. So as you hit submit, it would go out and see, hey, by the way, we found these, could be similar. Do you want to continue?
Yeah.
Or
that's actually in the product today. Unfortunately, cool. GM does not have it deployed yet.
Oh.
That's the proximity search tool for.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. Unfortunately, the holdback is that it requires a little bit of IT work to set it up. And it's not burdensome in any way, but for our AWS customers, we provide it for free. But if you're on Premium Bundle, our AWS customers, you have that turned on. So when you write an issue, at the bottom, it'll show you all the issues in its cluster. If that was the centroid of a cluster, it would show you all the issues in its own cluster. And we have the same thing with knowledge packets too. So If you're writing a knowledge packet, which represents a failure mode or lessons learned or a best practice, or it'll show you all the ones authored by anybody else and the degree of similarity from knowledge packet to knowledge packet. It's a really good technology when it's deployed properly. Okay, I got a little housekeeping to do. So we all spent a lot of time. I thank all of you for coming, but the logical planning of this conference is done predominantly by Brittany. So I'd like to call her out. Brittany, thank you so much. Look at Brittany's hand. She does a lot of work, and she has some extremely unique talents in her ability to manage lists and get things done. So thank you, Brittany. Brittany has also asked me, because she's so efficient, to remind everybody to do the conference surveys. They are extremely important to us because as a community interested in knowledge aware or the Auros software, depending on which direction you're coming from, we want to make this a better and better conference. So if you hated it, tell us. Tell us why, please. If you hated it, please tell us why. Last year we had some people tell us why. So it was good. It was great. We made changes because of those criticisms. If you like it, tell us. We'll do more of that stuff. Okay? So please do go to it's really important. If you can find a few seconds in the app, it's called feedback, right, Brittany? Does it say feedback? Survey. Go to the survey and just fill it out. It's not too hard. You can do it with your finger. It's all cool. A special thank you to all of our presenters. It takes a great deal of time and effort to present at our conference, so they do it, out of their goodwill. So thank you very much. Give a big hand for the presenters. And lastly, I hope you all come back next year. I really do, because I'm absolutely certain there's going to be a lot more to talk about. A lot of new customers that I know are coming into the mix in the next couple months, so it should be a bigger conference and a lot more interesting things to talk about as well.